Story 1, interesting thread. The theme is, because my vote does not matter. Story 2, I know people who have never gone to school, never voted, and never learned about any of it. They had to start working at 15 and have worked ever since. Usually, they work 2 jobs to take care of their kids as single parents and say that voting and politics are for smart people. They don't know Republican from Democrat or what any of that means. I know a lot of people like this. You would be surprised how many people are like that, and I am talking about people in their 30s. Story 3, in this thread, people downvoting real reasons others do not vote because they disagree with them. Also in this thread, nobody is giving real reasons they do not vote. You will have to sort by controversial. Story 4, I am in a constant moral dilemma of hearing, do not complain if you did not vote, and you voted for this, do not complain. Story 5, I live in Florida. The 2 candidates running for Senate are Daryl Parks and Corey Simon. Each one seems to have a huge advertising budget because they both run ads constantly, all saying the same thing. My opponent lies. Hi, I'm Daryl Parks. Corey Simon lies. Hi, I'm Corey Simon. Daryl Parks lies. Now imagine hearing that over and over every single day. At this point, I dislike both of them. If either one of them would cut their advertising budget by at least 25% and donate it to hurricane victims, I would vote for them immediately. But they want to spend their money telling us constantly that the other one lies, and I am tired of hearing it. Story 6. I work with about 8 people in their 20s, and none are registered to vote. The same applies to their spouses. I simply did not care at that age either, but I knew what was ethical to me. Currently, my disagreement with registering is that my state posts your name and address publicly. This is not ideal if you do not want your past to follow you. Story 7. Let me sum it up and save you some scrolling. Reason 1. Life is good for them either way, and they have no interest in politics. Reason 2. They have been convinced by nihilists and cynics that their vote does not matter and will not change anything. Reason 3. They do not like any of the candidates enough to feel that either deserves their vote. Reason 4. They do not know enough about the candidates to make a decision that is not just a coin toss. Story 8. In 2016, I was very depressed and lived in a place that was going downhill. This year, I have a mail-in ballot coming and do not know when it will arrive. Fingers crossed. Story 9. Because I am not well educated on the issues and do not have enough spare time to prioritize educating myself on them, I would rather not cast another uneducated vote, as I am sure we already have plenty of those. Story 10. Most people who urge others to vote are motivated by a desire for their preferred candidate to receive more votes, rather than acting as neutral voices in the interest of democracy. These same individuals would prefer that you not vote if they knew you were supporting a different candidate. To me, this is extremely disingenuous. Story 11. I am 28 and have never registered to vote. It is the candidate's job to convince me to vote for them, not mine. If neither can convince me they will make the country better, they have not done their job for me. Therefore, they do not get my vote. 1. If I keep perceiving the country getting worse every 4 years, no matter who is in office, why should who I vote for matter? 2. If a president stood for something I believe in wholeheartedly and was confident, I would vote. Previous candidates have lost much of my trust with many empty promises, so it takes a lot to convince me. 3. In my opinion, it is the job of the people running for president or any office to convince me to vote for them. It is not my job to convince myself why someone should be president. Constant calls, signs everywhere, 20 texts per day, poor debates where no one answers a single question, and no real agenda are not getting me off this fence. Story 12. I would vote if there was a none of the above option that would force a new election with all new candidates if it won. I am tired of having to choose between a bad option and a worse option, or as in most local elections, you do not get a choice because all candidates run unopposed. Story 13. I imagine I will receive a lot of criticism, but I am 39 and have never voted. My main reason is that I have never felt informed enough to make an educated decision one way or the other. My vote would be influenced solely by family and media. I do not wish to spend my free time researching and fact-checking data just to vote and feel good about it. When politics come up in conversations and I listen, many things I hear usually turn out to be untrue or only half true. I disagree greatly with the two-party system as it only makes any given issue even more polarized. Granted, I am not familiar enough with our election process to know why it is the way it is. I am short, I do not like the candidates, the polarization, or how extreme issues are taken, and I dislike the system. Story 14. I am a conservative living in an overwhelmingly liberal city, to such an extent that the only political ads are from the Democratic Party. The others do not waste time and money campaigning here. My vote would truly mean nothing in the Electoral College, in the state vote since one city controls the entire state, or in local elections for the same reasons. I choose to live here because I love the area and how wild nature is just a short car ride away. Politicians are all liars and their promises mean nothing anyway. So why bother? Story 15. I do not vote for people if I do not think they should be in power. None of the candidates fit that criterion. Voting for the lesser of two evils is why we have regressed to such a disastrous situation. Story 16. I live in a state that is predominantly one political party, and it is not even close. My vote does not matter either way. Story 17. Vote for the Republican who will negatively affect me or the Democrat who will negatively affect me. Story 18. If you go into a store and nothing they offer is appealing to you, you do not buy something that you think might be the least bad option. You simply do not buy anything. Story 19. There is no candidate who represents my political beliefs. Story 20. First, I did not vote because I thought, it is not like Donald Trump is going to win anyway. It is fine. Then something happened with my voter registration. Apparently, this happened to a lot of other people from my state, and I was told I could not re-register in time. I now have my new voter registration card sitting on my kitchen table and have already found a ride to my polling station on Election Day. Story 21. Cards Against Humanity is now paying people who did not vote last time to vote this time. Story 22. Disillusionment with politics as a whole after the past 8 years, and I do not like any of the candidates on the ballot. Story 23. I strongly dislike these types of questions. I firmly believe everyone who is eligible to vote should do so. I disagree with the reasons people give for not voting. If every actual answer to a question is ignored, then why ask it in the first place? Story 24. Most of the time, it is just not compelling enough reasoning. The two-party system, with both parties corrupted and/or incompetent. Story 25. Both sides are so fundamentally flawed that I feel I cannot morally vote for either candidate. Based on my own views, if I were to vote for someone, I would be at least a little responsible for their actions because I co-signed it with my vote. Every presidential candidate in my adult life has failed that test, mostly on issues of war. I do vote in local elections, but in federal elections, I cannot bring myself to do it. Story 26. Donald Trump is a foolish individual. Kamala Harris is like the coworker we have all encountered and wondered how she manages to work here. She is largely ineffective. Story 27. Because they stopped bothering to earn it. We all fell for the "you must vote" propaganda hook, line, and sinker. These days, it's just a given that if you don't vote, you aren't doing your civic duty, but that is completely different from how it used to be. Back in the past, politicians knew they had to follow through on campaign promises or risk not getting reelected. They knew this because citizens actually cared about things like voting records and follow-through. As a result, they fought for the things we wanted while occasionally slipping in things they wanted. Back then, we only wanted informed voters. The unwashed masses were a powerful block of gullible votes that were mostly ignored as a result of this dynamic, unless the voting base wanted something for them. Then the whole "everyone should vote no matter what" rhetoric started, and a few generations later, here we are. Now they actively court the uninformed. Now they are no longer beholden to follow through. Now voting records might as well not exist. We will diligently march out and vote for whichever party we prefer. End of discussion. They know 100% that nothing they do matters, and they will still get reelected year after year even when they continually do the exact opposite of what their base wants. Now they are only concerned with doing things they want while occasionally slipping in something we want. It's completely backwards. They stopped bothering to earn my vote, comfortable in the knowledge that in modern times all that matters is the party they are affiliated with. Voting is proxy support. It is saying that I support this system as it is. When something is this broken, I cannot in good conscience endorse it. Voting to change the system is a non sequitur now that we have devolved so much, since the ones charged with making those changes would have only done so if we held them accountable, and we no longer do. So this is me holding them accountable by not re-electing them yet again. If more of us followed suit, we would actually see some change. Imagine if all voters stayed home, if the final tally was a meager 10,000 votes between both parties. It would send a very loud and clear message that they can't continue business as usual. It would tell them unequivocally that we are done playing their game, and if they want to remain in power, they will go back to doing what we want in a timely fashion. Yes, it means 4 years of the other side being in office, but I guarantee you the next time election season rolls around, things will be different. The next one will know that they have eyes on them and will need to do more than blow smoke to stay in office. We would finally get back to a government of the people by the people. Instead, we will just shame each other into voting even though neither party deserves it. We will continue to bash our heads into the wall and perform mental gymnastics, believing this time will be different for some reason. We will continue to reward this behavior and give them zero incentive to change. And we will be right back here 4 years later. Story 28. Because I legitimately dislike all of our political candidate options, I want my absence to be counted as a refusal to settle for the poor choices we keep getting in office. Story 29. When presented with two unpleasant options, most people would choose the one that is less offensive and smaller. I choose to remove both options completely. We are not the same. The choice is an illusion. Watch and find out. Story 30. Bill Hicks summed it up well about 32 years ago. George Carlin said it better before that. The point is, it does not matter who wins. They are both paid by the same people, the ones with the money and power who run this country. Keep thinking your vote will change the world as you buy another iPhone and send more money to the people who pay the president and Congress to give you the illusion of choice. Story 31. The Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee are private organizations that represent and serve the elite class of this country. I am not elite, so my vote does not matter. Story 32. Does it matter who I vote for when both parties seem to be cut from the same cloth of greed and corruption? Over the last 50 years, everything has gotten worse for the middle and lower classes, while the ultra-rich have gotten wealthier no matter which party won the vote. The planet is dying, poverty is worsening, politicians can be bought, bribed, and blackmailed, and the spread of disinformation is unhinged and unstoppable. We are also supporting military actions that harm innocent civilians, including children. I will vote for the candidate who I believe will improve the situation, but in the end, my rent will go up, my wages will not keep up with inflation, I will go further into debt, and nothing significant will change. The world is run by a group of greedy, selfish people who ask us to choose between limited options, but we deserve better. Story 33. I don't vote when arrogant people start vote shaming. You have to vote. It's your responsibility as a citizen. How can you not vote? Soldiers died in World War II so you could have the right to vote. I also have the right to not participate in the election process. Now I need to prove it. Obnoxious vote shaming leaves me no other choice. Story 34. Because very little public policy changes from one administration to the next, who the president is has almost no appreciable impact on my life. Story 35. Because both sides are ultimately paid off by the same large corporations, and if voting made a difference, we would not be encouraged to do it. Story 36. Because I refuse to vote for one candidate because I hate the other candidate. Because I refuse to vote for a candidate simply because I share the same gender. Because I refuse to keep playing this foolish game where I am told I must vote for one of two corrupt, incompetent individuals. Because, on top of all of the above, I am told that my vote does not matter, only the electoral vote counts. Because voters repeatedly say this issue matters to them, and then politicians do whatever they want anyway with no consequences. So, a better question is, why would I vote? Although, I should add, I do vote in everything up to a state level, but I am not voting for senators, representatives, or presidents. Story 37, because I despise both major candidates, I am not going to vote for someone I really hate just because they are better than the person I really hate. Donald Trump voters seem determined to increase divisiveness and spread false conspiracy theories. People voting for Kamala Harris have made me feel like my opinions do not matter since they supported Hillary Clinton. I am tired of hearing that they are entitled to my vote for their despicable candidate because at least it is not Donald Trump. Edit. I am voting for everything else but leaving the president blank. Story 38. I will not vote simply to oppose the other candidate. I want to support the policies the candidate is campaigning on, not just to prevent the other person from holding office. I do not agree with Donald Trump. I do not agree with Kamala Harris. Therefore, I will not vote for either of them. Story 39. Why should I care? I dislike about 50% of each side's policy platforms, so if I were to vote, it would be for some random person or third-party candidate. If I do that, I am essentially wasting my vote, so why waste the time? Either way, the government does not care about me, so there is no benefit to caring about them. Story 40. I do not keep up with politics and have no interest, so why would I vote out of ignorance? Sadly, the majority of actual voters treat it as a popularity contest and enjoy the drama of arguing with others instead of finding the person best suited for the job. That is why we do not have good leaders, because people vote based on their feelings. Story 41. My state will be called for Kamala Harris as soon as the polls close, like it is not even going to be close. I have very few county positions that are contested. The measures and propositions are usually the only things worth voting on. If there is nothing in there I care about, why bother? If I lived in a state that was close, I might care more. Story 42. Not voting is essentially a vote for none of the above. It is a perfectly valid choice. Story 43. Participating in the system legitimizes it. I think it is broken and in need of major reform to truly represent the will of the people. Therefore, I do not tacitly consent by voting. Also, the candidates are not good. Story 44. Both sides are wrong. Neither cares about us. The Electoral College makes your point irrelevant. Voting only feeds your tribal ego and is a waste of time. Story 45. I don't believe in the American political system anymore. I turned 18 in 2008, and I have voted in every presidential election since then. Straight Democrat every time in a deep red state. The Democratic Party has changed too much. There is a sense of disconnect and arrogance that I cannot support anymore. I mean, seriously, Kamala of all people? Story 46. It feels like a flawed system where my vote does not matter. The choices are poor, and the politicians never fulfill their promises. It is a popularity contest instead of an actual election for a leader who presents substantive policies. Even those who discuss legitimate issues seldom provide reasonable, well-thought-out solutions. They just talk endlessly to gain support from people who watch the news to become angry about matters that do not affect them. Then we have a divided government. Even if we elect someone who wants to make change and is making the effort, Congress or the House of Representatives can shut it down based on which corporation bribed them the most. Alternatively, a previously appointed judge can block it because the previous president has influence over that judge. Story 47. They are going to do what they are going to do anyway. Voting does not matter in my opinion. Story 48. Generally speaking, if I do not vote, it is because I do not believe a candidate has earned my vote. I am not a person who votes for someone just to vote against a candidate. Story 49. I am traveling full-time and do not have a permanent address in any state. Story 50. Because I want to vote for the person who will actually fight for my interests, not the person who says they will punch me in the face with less force than the opposition. Story 51. No one is offering healthcare, affordable college, a living wage, corruption reform, or fair elections, so I can vote for someone who will provide one of those things. Story 52. Well, I did and didn't. I threw my vote away with fake names. Godspeed Tai T. Budthul, forever immortalized in my state's write-ins on official records. This started almost a decade ago. I turned my ballot in. I was in another state, so it was mailed to me, promptly filled out and filed. It was a huge topic that year concerning something I am very political about. My vote got tossed and I called the ballot office in my county to ask why. The woman who handled my ballot smugly said, "I don't recognize the signature. The same signature I have used since I was 18. She was laughing about it despite my providing proof of identity. In short, she illegally discarded my ballot. Oddly, that year a law was passed, and a politician who was going to be removed suddenly had just enough votes to stay in office. Very odd. Additionally, I noticed the ballot books are biased as certain parties and agendas get more pages, while opposing parties and independent parties barely get a paragraph or opposing views get only 2 to 3 sentences. I voted for Tai T. Budthol, Noah Cox, Louise Budthol, Pete Harthofer, Fu P. Ahunts, Noel B. Alls, Schmeg Wallaker, Brent Dick, Puk Hunt. This was my protest against anyone on the ballot. Story 53. Left America. I do not consider it my country anymore. Love it or leave it. I left it. Story 54. I quit voting when I noticed that no matter who was in office, things kept getting worse over time. People can hardly afford to buy a house, and some struggle just to buy food because things are so expensive. Yet people still believe their side is for them and not for big business or the industrial complex. It has all been bought and paid for, and I am tired of the puppet show. Story 55. Because I really do not feel like being forced to pick between very poor options. Seriously, the last election when I did not hate both of the final candidates was when Barack Obama got reelected. I do not understand how I am supposed to pick between two people I dislike, especially the last 2 times when I disliked them for similar reasons. Story 56. In the United States, both political parties prioritize their own interests. So many people feel indifferent. Story 57. I will vote when there is someone I want to vote for. At the presidential level, voting for either of our 2 main choices feels like picking between undesirable options. For those who say if I do not vote, I cannot complain about whoever wins, that is not true. I pay taxes. Therefore, I can express my opinions. It does not really matter anyway because we are all influenced by corporate America, especially BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. Ultimately, who you vote for does not matter. Story 58. Reddit system and subculture are not built for this type of discussion. The karma system would need to be eliminated for any unfiltered answers, as the responses are most likely to be unfavorable on average. I would go one step further and remove replying just for the sake of hearing reasons without scrutiny if you truly want to hear answers from all Americans. Otherwise, you will just get people answering for others or in-thread topics being the most visible. Story 59. The choices are poor. Donald Trump was a disaster and will be another disaster if elected. Joe Biden is a disaster, and Kamala Harris will continue 4 more years of the same disaster. Story 60. The majority of Americans feel that their vote does not really matter. It is not always easy to vote in America. Polling places can be in inconvenient locations, you may need to wait hours in line to vote, and they may require a form of identification you do not have and cannot afford to acquire. Story 61. People post their opinions. Others respond by yelling and screaming at them. Then you wonder why they are not involved or do not care in the first place. Just my 2 cents reading the genuine comments here, sorted by controversial. Story 62. Jury duty. I have been called for jury duty 6 times in a 10-year period. You cannot get that time back. I would rather be unregistered than sit through it again. Story 63. In 2016, I did not vote because I disliked both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and could not decide. I had not yet determined whether I was left or right politically and took pride in being a centrist or undecided at that time. Seeing what Donald Trump has done to this country has pushed me further left than I ever expected, and I am certain it is now impossible to bring me back to the middle. Lesson learned. Good job, Republicans. You lost a potential voter because of your actions over the past few years. Story 64. Because I am tired of my worth being dictated by a popularity contest over who has touched enough no-no squares to benefit someone else and harm another person. I am not choosing between 2 harmful options. Forget that. Give me a deterministic computer, or change it to a nationwide mandated week of voting on a range of policies. Story 65. Here is what people who do not vote are failing to understand. Whether you vote or not, you are participating in the election regardless. The only difference is you are giving up control by not voting. You are still a part of the system whether you vote or not. By not voting, you are falling for the propaganda of the party that does not want you to vote. In the United States, one side has many more votes than the other, so the side with fewer votes wants you to abstain. They know that if you did vote, you would not vote for them. So, they use all kinds of propaganda like telling you your vote does not matter or that both sides are equally bad. This is propaganda and it is not true. You are falling for it by not voting. No matter what justifications you give for not voting, you are being influenced by propaganda without realizing it. Here is the truth. We all know the two-party system is flawed. We all know the Democratic Party is corrupt, and politicians on both sides are corrupt. However, one side is significantly worse than the other. The Republican Party is worse for you than the Democratic Party. The only time this is not true is if you are very wealthy, and in that case it does not matter which party is in power because both parties exist to make wealthy people wealthier. But over 90% of us do not live in that bracket, so the difference between the parties is much more significant to you. For those who do live in that wealth bracket, the Democratic Party is better for the other 90% of the country. By not voting for them, you are harming the vast majority of the country for temporary personal gain. Just not voting for the Republican Party is not enough. You need to vote. Otherwise, you are doing exactly what the Republican Party wants you to do. You are still engaging in the two-party system. You are not escaping it by not voting. You are playing right into their hands. The only way through this situation is by voting for the candidate who is more likely to be held accountable. And right now, that is the Democratic Party. The more we vote and push for accountability, the better it gets, but only by voting. Please vote. Story 66. I did not vote until certain people entered the running and threatened to destroy or limit aspects of my life, with some actually succeeding. Even if you are like me and despise politics, your vote is important, and it does matter. I learned that by living in Texas. I know who I am voting for. Story 67. For presidential elections, there is no point. If you believe your vote helps determine who becomes president, you need to research how the presidential election process works. I am not even considering participating in that flawed system. For state and local elections, there is not enough incentive for me to give up my privacy. If there is a candidate promising something very good or bad in my eyes, then I would register and vote accordingly. Since these elections matter more to day-to-day life than the presidential election, I am not opposed to voting, but I have not seen any policies that I am passionate about. Story 68. I vote because I live in a swing state, so my vote matters more than someone in California, but I never feel good about it. I consider myself a progressive, but I have never really voted for anyone who truly represents my beliefs. I will never vote Republican for obvious reasons, but Democrats do not do much to appeal to me either. They are very much a lighter version of the Republican Party on many issues, and it feels like over the last few months the Harris campaign has taken a hard turn to the right on many issues. When she announced she had some goodwill from progressives based on some of her stances, and it was refreshing to see. Picking walls and really throwing a lot of the Republican tactics back at them was a welcome change. But slowly, Harris and Walz have been moderating themselves to appeal to moderate Democrats, and it really makes me not want to bother. Again, I live in a swing state, so I will suck it up and vote. But I know many people in my age group who are not exactly motivated to go out and vote for the party whose main argument is, hey, at least we are not the other guys. Story 69. I know an individual who is young and afraid to vote for two reasons. First, the Maricopa elections in 2020 were her first time voting, and the ballots ended up in other hands. Second, she is afraid that if Donald Trump wins, her name will be on a murder list. I really don't know how to guide her with this. Story 70. Am I supposed to vote for the Democratic candidate who will harm me, or the Republican candidate who will harm me? Either way, politics is one big harm. Story 71. Unless you are in a battleground state, your vote has little impact, at least for the presidential election. Story 72. All the options are unsatisfactory, and I do not agree with the policies presented by either side. Story 73. Do not want to sit in line for an hour or more on a weekday after working long hours and nightly duties when I get home. For your information, I plan on voting. Story 74. I am Indigenous American. I am Sikangu and Choctaw. I am not taking part in an election for a government of a country I do not believe should even exist. I observe the rising political tensions. I can only hope that one day the United States succeeds in tearing itself apart. Story 75. Above the local level and possibly the state level, votes do not significantly matter. Story 76. I used to live in a solid blue state, so my vote did not matter. Now I live in a solid red state, and my vote still does not matter. If I lived in a swing state, I would vote because my vote would matter then. Story 77. It is reality television. I am almost 50 years old, and I have never voted for anything and never will. Story 78. I probably will because one option looks far worse than the other, but I am kind of sick of being given bad choices. I did not in 2016, and to be honest, I kind of regretted not having voted. Story 79. Because I am not going to stand in line for multiple hours just to decide who I want to fund genocide with my tax dollars. Story 80. Political apathy and disconnection from the current government systems affect voter participation. I voted in the 2020 federal election, but I understand why some people did not. Story 81. I do not vote mostly because both political parties here in the United States are just insane. Story 82. Because the country is run by corporations and the military-industrial complex, you have to be a brainwashed fool to continue participating in this theater they call an election every 4 years. Let's release that Epstein Island list before we start talking about voting for either of these clown show parties. Story 83. If 1/3 of Americans do not vote, how did we get 150 million votes in the last election? Story 84. I firmly believe that both major political parties are harmful. I do not think either is worse than the other in any practical sense. We need a true multi-party system, not the big government oligarchy we have now. Story 85. I'm 25 and not informed enough. I can't read 900-page bills like some people do, so I watch videos about them. Then I get 4 different stories about what the bill is about. Therefore, I still don't know what it is, and I'd rather not vote for something I don't fully understand when there is so much blatant lying. Ohio, for example, Billboard 1. Vote yes on Issue 1 to end gerrymandering. Billboard 2. Vote no on Issue 1 to end gerrymandering. Do I like the idea of gerrymandering? No. Do I have proper information on which would end gerrymandering? No. Story 86. Because if both parties see they are leaving millions of potential voters on the sidelines, they might be more likely to bring a worthy candidate in the next election. Story 87. I cannot in good conscience vote for either candidate, and voting for myself has lost some of the amusement as I have gotten older. Story 88. I will vote for a candidate I believe in. If there is not a candidate I truly believe in, then none of them deserve my vote. If you look around at modern American politics, there are very few candidates deserving of anyone's vote in my opinion. Story 89. I voted in the last couple of elections, but I am unrepresented by both mainstream political parties and always have been. Story 90. Don't believe in a two-party system. When I was a kid, I had an exchange student. He was from rural Russia, around 23 years old, roughly 6'3", and played college basketball there. A really tough and hardened person, I would say. I remember the first day he arrived in America, we went to the grocery store to get him some food he would enjoy. We were walking down the aisles and reached the condiment aisle when all of a sudden he broke down and started crying uncontrollably. I was pretty shocked. I was staring at this giant of a man who seemed like the toughest human I had ever met, and he was weeping on the floor of a grocery store staring at ketchup. When he had calmed down and collected himself, we asked him what that was all about. He explained in his broken English that where he is from, there is only one type of ketchup at the store, and that's what you buy. He saw in this American grocery store an aisle with probably 30 different types of ketchup. Different brands, shapes, sizes, even colors. The idea of having that many choices for something so simple was just overwhelming to him. He had never experienced so many options and choices before. I have either never voted or voted third party. To me, the fact that we have more ketchup choices in the grocery store than candidates for President of the United States is insulting. It is undemocratic to me. Choosing between one of two candidates, forced down our throats by large donations and media companies, is not free will. It is almost no better than the system he comes from, in my opinion. We have one snake with two heads. It is impossible for either candidate to fully and entirely represent my views. I am asked to vote for one of two people who most align with me, which for me is maybe a 60% match on my views. I don't support that system. I want a ketchup aisle of choices. Story 91. I used to, and I probably will again someday. Short answer. Locally, I'm not invested in this area, and nationally, all the candidates are poor choices. Long answer. The first time I voted was in the primary election at the end of my senior year of high school. I grew up in a political family and was involved in local politics. When I went to college, I could continue to vote in my hometown due to the student exemption. When I first started working, I was hours away from my hometown, didn't know anyone, and everyone I worked with was older, so I didn't meet anyone my age. I've been here for 8 years and still have no friends my age nearby. I go home 2 to 3 times a month and spend time with family and friends from my hometown. I'm more involved in my hometown's political affairs than those of my current area. I just can't find common ground here. I want to go home, but I can't because of my and my wife's work situations. She's also from my hometown. I brought her here for my work, and now that she has a successful career, she doesn't want to leave. All that to say, locally, I don't really care what happens because I want to leave. Nationally, I'm pretty sure South Park said it best back when it was Trump versus Hillary. What's the point when both sides have poor views, both sides have flaws, and each might have 1 or 2 issues you care about, but they also want to undermine something else you value. Story 92. You might not agree with politics, but politics will affect you. Story 93. There are legitimate issues that are important to me, but I do not agree with their other policies. Additionally, they are all criminals. It seems to be an open secret that Nancy Pelosi has insider trading knowledge. You see many headlines demanding that Donald Trump go to jail, but not a word about Nancy Pelosi. Make it make sense. Story 94. The government will never represent my interests because it is self-serving. If the government cared about civil liberties, freedoms, and anti-corruption measures as much as I do, it would take responsibility and step down from office. I do not vote because the government takes my money under the guise of public service, yet perpetuates a system of exploitation through corporations allied with certain senators and governors, creating a predatory environment for future generations. Story 95. Because voting is an illusion of choice. The single-party system always wins. Story 96. If we eliminated electoral voting and votes actually counted as much as we were told growing up, more people might feel like it matters. Story 97. As someone who did not vote regularly before but does now, 1. It did not seem like my vote mattered. 2. The process of registering and voting seemed overwhelming. 3. General apathy towards anything political. Story 98. Registering to vote would make my address publicly available to my violent stalker, who was released from prison a few years ago. Yes, I am aware of mail forwarding systems for survivors of domestic abuse who want to vote. Only certain people and situations qualify for that anonymity, and I do not qualify. I sincerely wish I could participate in this very important civic duty, but it is simply not safe for me to do so. Story 99. I think that aspiring to govern is inherently an evil enterprise. People should not want to make decisions for others regarding how they live their lives or what they do with their time and the fruits of their effort. I could not in good faith write anyone's name on a ballot other than my own. Story 100. Hi, I was eligible to vote in the last 2 presidential elections, but this is the first time I will be voting. What changed for me? I actually have a candidate that I want to vote for. Part of my personal belief is that we all have the right to vote to express our beliefs. I also believe that it is your right not to vote to express your beliefs. In 2016 and 2020, I did not have a candidate that I thought was the right choice for president, so it was my right not to vote for someone I did not believe in. Now I am voting because there is someone on the ballot I do believe in. Story 101. I cannot stand either of them. Please provide some better options. Story 102. Because I do not support either candidate, and a vote for anyone else is pointless. Story 103. Because I believe we are a two-party nation and I do not agree with either most of the time. I wish people would realize there are more than two candidates. Story 104. I vote when there is someone I want in office regardless of their chances. When there is not, I do not vote for the least worst option. I do not vote often. Story 105. To blame you all for continuing the same negative downward spiral of the empire. This country has so much potential. The two-party system will not give you that. Local elections are what matter most. Corporations and donors control the decisions, not some unprincipled person from either party. Story 106. Neither party represents my views. Even when one somewhat does, voting for them means also voting for something I really do not want. Story 107. I can't blame them, really. This is the era where we all know that our politicians are legally bribed to do whatever the corporations want. Our politicians are in it only for their money, not even ours as a collective. If someone with a large enough following wants, they can cause turmoil and attempt coups to gain power and never suffer any consequences for it. My conspiracy theory is that the election is a show for the highest elite to get a laugh at how stressed and angry we all get over it, only to influence whoever wins or whoever they want to win via legal bribery. But even I am not delusional enough to think I might be wrong, so I vote. Story 108. Having a vote is supposed to make you feel you have a choice. You do not. Both sides are the same, greedy and bought by corporations and people richer than them. I would rather vote on how our tax money is spent or if we invade another country. Story 109. Because I honestly do not care. My vote is meaningless, and besides, I would rather not vote for people I do not care for. I tend to agree with George Carlin's take on voting. I refuse to play the game that pits both sides against each other. I know none of these politicians care about me, as they are beholden to their corporate overlords. This country was bought and paid for a long time ago. Third party? Reddit has told me voting third party is a waste of time. Story 110. For those who choose not to vote, do you feel that it does not matter who is in power? In other words, have you accepted the status quo as something you cannot influence? Is there anything that would motivate you to vote? Playing devil's advocate. What if no one voted at all, just like you? What is your alternative to the current system? I understand the frustration. Our political system has many flaws, and I would love to see real change. But unlike a job or a marriage, where you can simply move on if things do not work out, a government or democracy does not have an easy reset button. Yes, there are alternatives to our current system, but most people probably would not enjoy the types of leadership those alternatives could bring. Or maybe they would. We might find out one day. Governing is incredibly complex. I struggle to manage my own household, let alone a country of 300 million people. As voters, we need grace, hope, and action to be our North Star. Story 111. First reason, in my opinion, you have to be a very unpleasant person to be a politician. Second reason, on deployment, they had us all vote if we wanted. As we were leaving the country, we found all those votes in a storage box. Third reason, they are going to put whoever they want in. Fourth reason, politics is unwise. Story 112. I have abstained from voting in the past because I did not feel informed enough on the issues at hand or the stance of the politicians to make a responsible vote. I believe that the only thing worse than being silent and complacent is being loud and ignorant. Story 113. There have not been any candidates that deserve my support. When that changes, I will vote. And then everyone says, if you do not vote, you cannot complain. Like they are blindly supporting whatever party they like more and voting every time regardless of the candidate. If 33% of people do not even participate, it is probably because the system is broken. Fix it, then I will participate. Story 114. If voting truly mattered in this country, it would have been outlawed a long time ago. Story 115. George said it best so long ago. Story 116. I am a progressive. No one who gets into office will represent my interests or fix any of the problems that different political factions agree on. Story 117. I do not vote because honestly, I do not really care which person sends my money to Israel. It feels foolish to worry so much about which candidate will be funding a proxy war in the Middle East. Story 118. Because I genuinely feel like disorder is better than any of the options this election. I cannot trust any candidate this time around to actually care about me once it is not good for their image, so I would rather let the situation deteriorate. Story 119. Because neither party represents me. They are both big government and just want to spend my money in different ways. I want an extremely small federal government, and not even the Republican Party is serious about doing that. Story 120. Because neither candidate is worth voting for, I am not going to waste time driving to the polls and standing in line to vote for a candidate who does not represent anything I believe in. When was the last time there was a candidate on a ballot for whom you felt confident voting? Story 121. Politicians and corporations are united in corruption. Until voters are ready to make radical decisions to reform this corrupt system, I will not waste my time voting. People are either too selfish, ignorant, or afraid to take drastic measures, so nothing will change. I have nothing invested in this country, so I will do my best to live life to the fullest until I die. I do not care what happens to the world after that. Humanity should simply go extinct. Story 122. Voter intimidation is occurring in my county, and the police are involved. Story 123. Whoever you want me to vote for, I am voting for the other. Story 124. I cannot vote for anyone who supports and finances the Israeli genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Palestine. This is the first election in which I will not be voting since I became eligible. Story 125. I always vote. Not voting in 3 weeks, though. Not wasting my time on either one. Story 126. Because I dislike the two-party system and refuse to contribute to it by picking the lesser of two evils. I feel much happier not caring about what is going on in the political world. Honestly, in my opinion, the system seems so counterproductive that it does not matter who is in office. Additionally, we are becoming more and more divided, which is dangerous. Story 127. After Hillary Clinton won the popular vote but lost the election, it made me feel as though there was no point. Story 128. Because both parties are unsatisfactory and I do not agree with their policies, I vote in local elections sometimes. Story 129. No one running for office has ever told me what they are going to do for me, not what I can do for them. Story 131. Like most people, my vote does not matter because of the Electoral College. I live in upstate New York. No matter what we choose, New York City's vote already carries more weight, and the primary is already decided. 2. There has been corruption on both sides for years, not just this election. There is also incredible illegal activity on both sides, including dead voters. 3. They are all corrupt, greedy individuals who could cure cancer, end sex trafficking, hunger, regulate pharmaceuticals, and improve American food safety but do not. Therefore, I do not bother. I just live a quiet life trying to be mainly off the grid. Story 131. I am tempted to vote for whichever candidate is most likely to speed up the dissolution of the United States, as I believe our political system is unsalvageable. However, since both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris appear to support the genocide in Gaza, I find myself morally incapable of voting for either of them. In the end, I will probably vote third party or write-in. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.